For me, it means that even though I have a lot of passions, I'm a triathlete, I'm a mom, I love writing, all these different topics or niche or whatever you call it, they can come together under my vision of empowering people, because I can talk about how I can empower other women who have children, but they want to make a career. I very often talk about sports and how sports is a great tool for empowerment. It gives you confidence. It removes beliefs. So try it. My advice to the audience is try to remove everything else. Focus on your vision. What is your bigger why? What impact you're trying to make? And all your multi-passions are going to start to make sense under that umbrella.
This is episode 121 of Multi-Passionate Like a Boss, and I'm your host, Jenny O'Connor. I'm a writer, entrepreneur, and certified shiny object lover, and I'm obsessed with finding the easy way to live the dream. Hey, Boss Fam, welcome back to the show. I am here today with another I Stalked Her for Years episode, and let me tell you how much friggin' fun it is for me to effectively meet my heroes. I know conventional wisdom says don't, and you all know how I feel about conventional wisdom, but my heroes tend to be real people who show me, and therefore you, what is possible for us. Real people who make big dreams come to life. So as much as I idolize Elizabeth Gilbert and would love to have her on the show one day, I think there's something so much more actionable about someone who was broke and burnt out and a stranger in a new land who turned all of that around and made epic leaps in a really condensed period of time. And that is today's guest, to a T. Veronica Llorca-Smith is an author, public speaker, and leadership consultant. She writes about growth mindset, personal development, and positivity, all my jams, and she has published 3 books and is currently about to publish her memoir. She's a mother to 2 humans and a fur baby, passionate about traveling, has lived in 9 countries, and speaks 6 languages. She is a triathlete who also completed an Ironman. I started following her when she was essentially a nobody on Medium, and in barely a year, she has blown up. It's going to sound like an overnight success story, except that I know that she has busted her ass to get here. The other day, she wrote a post about getting a traditional book deal for her memoir, a thing that is virtually impossible unless you are a world famous celebrity. And I decided that it was high time to pull the trigger and invite her onto the show. I am dying to learn how she does it all, and I think you guys are really going to benefit from listening to this conversation. Let's dig in. Welcome to the show, Veronica. How are you today?
I'm great. I'm actually in Hong Kong, so it's quite fun to be here starting my morning. So I'm in here tomorrow if the audience is in the US, or here in Asia is already in the morning.
Well, thank you for giving me your early morning attention. I so appreciate it. I wanted you to come on today because you are a lot of things. You are absolutely multi-passionate, but also because you are clearly an action taker. So for many creatives, we allow limiting beliefs about ourselves and our potential to keep us from taking action. You are strikingly different. Case in point, I reached out to you last week and you booked my next available interview day. And I can't tell you how often guests choose a slot that's like 30 days or more away, but you just get her done. And I have so many questions about that aspect of your personality. So let's just start with Medium. In a Medium story that you wrote last month, you stated that in September of 2022, you first started writing on Medium. You had no job, no background in writing, and no followers. 13 months later, which was the time that you wrote that particular story, you had published 482 stories on Medium, which is way more than one per day, 3 articles in South China Morning Post, and 3 books. And now you have a traditional book deal. How? How do you do all of these things? So let's unpack the last year in the life, okay? So starting with why did you decide to start writing on Medium, and how did you decide what to write about?
So I think, Jenny, maybe we can even go one step before that. And why did I start writing in the first place? Because I was 41 when I started writing, and most people by then they have figured out what they want to be when they grow up. And so for me, due to life circumstances, the pandemic, and many things, I ended up without a job, locked out of my country, my home residence, which is Hong Kong. So I ended up in Australia with my 2 young girls, separated from my husband, as a foreigner, without a network. So a very unusual situation. And for 6 months, I was looking for a job in the traditional corporate environment, which is where I had always been. I was the typical girl climbing the ladder, worked at Apple, Estee Lauder, these big companies. Then I fell off the ladder, no ladder anymore, and I wasn't able to find a job for whatever reasons. And I decided to start writing as a way to express myself, as a way to express the frustration from not finding a job, also because I was feeling lonely in a new country without my husband. And so by writing, I really felt a purpose. I really felt that I was able to reconnect with myself, to ask myself really tough questions. What do you really want to do? Do you want to keep on climbing this ladder? Where is this ladder taking you to? And so for people who are starting writing, I think the most important thing is to write of how you feel, what you're really feeling. Just be yourself, because then that's how you're going to start opening new doors. So to be very clear and honest, I didn't have this major strategy of I'm going to start writing on Medium. I didn't even know what Medium was at the time, or writing books. I just started to write as a way to express myself. So that was my starting point. My very first network or hub where I started writing was not actually Medium, it was LinkedIn. I started there more as a way to create a network that I didn't have, and to show the value that the recruiters did not see that I had. So I started more on LinkedIn with that purpose. And then what happened was very interesting. I thought, well, LinkedIn is great, but it doesn't really allow me to write longer articles. And so that's where I started on Medium. And my philosophy of doing things, I call it building blocks. I have a block. In this case, I start writing on LinkedIn. And then once I felt comfortable, what is my next block that is going to help me continue to grow? So it was Medium. And so when I started writing on Medium, unlike what many writers say that you have to have a niche and, you know, your content pillars and all of that, for me, it was never about a niche. It was always about a vision. I think a vision is so much bigger than a niche. Like if you think of Steve Jobs, he didn't have a niche. He had a vision. He wanted to create amazing products that could make people's life better. And so for me, the vision was, how can I use writing to empower other people and to unlock their potential? And so starting with this vision, it was much easier then for me to find topics of what to write about, because it could be my story of being unemployed and how I'm turning things around. It could be things that I learned in my past that could help others. So that's really how the journey started on Medium. And I'm going to pause here because it's quite a long story, so to let you and everyone sink in the concept.
I think that's the first time it's ever occurred to me, because as multi-passionates, niching, finding a niche is a virtual impossibility. It feels so limiting to be like, you have to talk about this one specific thing. That's the only way you make a name for yourself. And I've wrestled with it and even talked about it on the show. Like, I do think you should be known for one thing and you can do the other thing, but like, you just nailed it by having a vision rather than a niche. You can be your multi-passionate self. I mean, I love that your vision was the empowering people via whatever story, lesson, 5 tips for ... you happen to have in your toolkit. That just makes so much more sense for people like us, who I think feel really constrained by the idea of niching down. So thank you. That's that is a good one right there, worth the cost of admission.
I actually wrote an article recently. So now I'm on 497 articles on Medium. So one of these 400 plus was precisely, you don't need a niche. What you need is a vision. And it's one of my articles that went viral on Medium, because so many people had this aha moment of, oh my God, I felt that I was limiting myself in a box. And one of the points that I made in this article is that human nature is not about putting us in a box and trying to limit us inside a topic. Human nature is all about building those or taking down those walls, is about really removing those limitations. It's about creativity, is about evolving. And for so many people, it made so much sense. And what does that mean in practice? So in practice, for me, it means that even though I have a lot of passions, I'm a triathlete, I'm a mom, I love writing, all these different topics or niche or whatever you call it, they can come together under my vision of empowering people, because I can talk about how I can empower other women who have children, but they want to make a career. I very often talk about sports and how sports is a great tool for empowerment. It gives you confidence. It removes beliefs. So try it. My advice to the audience is try to remove everything else, focus on your vision. What is your bigger why? What impact you're trying to make? And all your multi-passions, because we're all multi-passionate, are going to start to make sense under that umbrella.
That's it's funny because I've just recently, this year was a very self-exploratory year for me. And I think that what I've just landed on is a vision, but I didn't have the word for, I was like, well, I guess this is my niche, but it's not, it's my vision. And you just put it into the perfect words. So that is just such an excellent piece of advice. I want to know when you started writing on Medium. So this is speaking to my like aspiring writers out there who want to find the time and the determination to write a book, but who also maybe don't have an audience yet. Did you know that you needed to aim to write an article a day? Like, how did that process come about? Did you do research, or did you just like start writing and this is what happened?
Well, as you explained at the very beginning of this episode, I have a clear action bias, which is great for some things. Sometimes it's not that great, which means that I just go. I go and I figure things out as I go. I think part of it is because since I was a kid, I had to move countries very often. Every 4 years, we were moving to a different country, new schools, new language. And so I just had to learn on the fly. And so I think that's what shaped me to be the way I am. And so when I started writing, I was like, the more you write, the more you write. Like for me, it's the same philosophy of sports or anything. Like the more you practice, the more confident you get. And so for me, that was the starting point, was to remove all these insecurities. A lot of people don't press publish because it's not perfect. So they have like the perfectionism syndrome, or they have insecurities of being criticized. When you remove all of that, it's much easier to just put yourself out there. And I always tell myself, well, what's the worst thing that's going to happen? Maybe that no one is going to read my article. Okay, but at least, one more step in the right direction. So I didn't have a plan of writing every day or having like a specific schedule, but I do believe that if you want to get good at something, practice is really, really important. So I dedicated myself every day some time to write. It wasn't necessarily about publishing the next article, but it could be ideation, it could be research. It was being committed about something I'm passionate about. And if my identity, one of my identities, let's say, is being a writer, what does a writer do? A writer writes. And so for me, it was building this habit. It was more building a habit of something that I love, of something that I'm committed to, that I wanted to get better at. And so I just started.
It's amazing because I have always believed myself to be a writer, but not actually been butt in chair doing it until this year, really is when it really started. So I can so relate to that fear of hitting publish. And I have to say that if you have a fear of hitting publish and then you do it 497 times, you probably get pretty confident that that's not going to stand in your way anymore, right?
Yes, and it's such an important message. Like you also mentioned that I booked this podcast straight away. So my first podcast, I did it exactly a year ago, September last year as well. And for my first podcast, I was nervous. I didn't know what to expect. I was even with the makeup and the camera and the technology, everything. I was so nervous. And the host, who is called Petra Zink, she's actually a personal brand strategist. Just before we started, she knew that it was my first one, and she said, "It doesn't have to be perfect." And I remember that sentence. And every time I go before a podcast or speaking in public or whatever, I reassure myself. And today I'm not nervous at all. Why? Because I've been in podcasts, over 20 podcasts. Sometimes things are not perfect, and they're not supposed to be. And I think that's also a very important message. Show up, because things are a big deal until you do them. And then you do them, you look back and you're like, actually, it's not really such a great deal anymore.
Yeah, confidence begets confidence. Like, that's absolutely true. And that's what I'm always encouraging my own audience is, like, take that baby step today, because tomorrow you can take a bigger step because you're a little bit more confident from yesterday because you completed that. I'm impressed that you don't get nervous before interviews anymore, because even after I'm in season 3 of doing this and I still get a little jittery. It's especially if I'm the one being interviewed, but like sometimes I'm a little sweatier than normal. These things still affect me. So, I mean, it's good. It's good, I think, for my audience to hear both. Like, you've gotten kind of over that fear, but I might be someone who always gets a little nervous before an interview, but both of us are doing the thing. And that's really what matters. So yeah, it's just great that that action piece is what has really propelled you forward. So tell me about when you decided to add Substack into your strategy, and explain a little bit about what Substack is in case my listeners don't know.
Yeah, so let's start with what is Substack. Substack is a hub where you can publish your newsletters, but it really works as, I call it, a publication of publications, because anyone can go into Substack and you can start to browse around and see different publications where different authors publish their newsletters. So that's really what it is, a publication of publications. The big value of Substack is that it allows you to build your audience. And by that, I mean that you create your email list. So whereas on LinkedIn or Facebook, for example, you don't really build your database, in Substack you do. And I didn't realize how important it was to have your own audience at the beginning of my journey writing. But I started to hear things and have hints of how critical it is. So the first one is, I started to research on writing books and publishing books. And one of the first questions that publishers ask authors is, how big is your audience and how big is your email list? So I was like, okay, this must be important. And then I noticed that all the biggest creators out there, Justin Welsh, and all the big names, they really emphasize the importance of an audience. But I wanted to understand for myself, why is this so important? And basically what I realized is that when people give you their email, they are giving you a vote of trust and confidence. So they are the people who already have seen you somewhere. They have had a point of contact with you, with your content, with your podcast, or whatever it is that you do. And then they are telling you, I want to hear more from you. So it's really your most loyal followers, the people that really like what you're doing. And so by having that email list and that close communication with them, you really build your tribe. So on Medium, for example, and I love Medium, but one of the things that is a reality is that I have zero control over the distribution. I don't know who is going to read what, when, if they're going to read it. On my newsletter, what I love is that I actually build a journey for my followers, for my, I like to call it, for my community. So my newsletter, my Substack, is called The Lemon Tree Mindset. And my vision is to empower people to build their thing and brand themselves. So that's my vision. There are 3 components. So one is empowerment, which is everything that has to do with inspiration, with motivation. So it's more that mindset piece. The second one is build your thing. So the entrepreneur, the solopreneur aspect of building online. And the third thing is branding yourself, because I do a lot of branding, is what I'm doing today as well. So these are my pillars. And so I build a journey around these pillars for the people in my community. And so they know that every Saturday, 8 a.m. Hong Kong time, they're going to receive something from me that is going to help them be a little bit better in their journey towards building their thing and brand themselves. I cannot do that in any other platform because I have no control of who is going to be there, what they're going to read. So that having that smooth continuity is something that is really, really nice, because many of the people who are now in my newsletter, they tell me, oh, I read this article. I look forward to seeing the next one about whatever the topic is. And so it really helps you have a much more cohesive experience for your readers. The last thing, and this is a bit more commercial, but it's also important, is that these are the people that when you offer a course or when you're selling a book or when you're launching something new, they're the people who are the most interested in what you do. They're the most likely to buy because they are already in your newsletter. Some of my subscribers are actually paid, so they are already paid, which I think is mind-blowing every month to receive what I write. And so these are the main components. So one, you own the distribution. Two, you have your close community where you really shape this experience for the readers. And then the third is the monetization element. You can really monetize a newsletter in many different ways.
Okay, so this is great. I want to unpack it a little bit. So for starters, my understanding is if you have an email service provider, so you already have a newsletter, Substack is kind of duplicating that. Is that your understanding as well? You don't need a newsletter and a Substack, right?
Correct. It's the same thing.
Okay. Versus Medium, you will end up with a lot of followers who like reading your work, but you do not have their email addresses. You cannot reach out to them when you want to for any reason, right?
Exactly. So that's the big difference right there. Yeah, it's a great explanation.
Okay, perfect. Because as a writer myself, I've considered all of these different options and what's the most efficient and all of that. So here's what gives me pause. I already have a newsletter, so I probably won't start a Substack, but if I wanted to, here's what gives me pause. You can have a paid one and you can have your free one. You already write so much. Like, let's just, how do we streamline this? Do you put everything you put on Medium also on Substack? And if so, what do you do differently for paid subscribers so that you are not spending every waking minute of your life writing?
So that's a really good point, because I think it's very important as a writer to have a strategy. It's not about how many platforms you have, it's about how you differentiate from them and what value they're adding to your community. And so for me on Substack, I write a lot of articles that are exclusive to my Substack community. And it's also very much under the three pillars that I described: is the empowerment, is the solopreneurship, and is also the personal branding. So that's the first thing. Whereas on Medium, for me, Medium, I call it the Wild West. I write about anything and everything. Is kind of my board, the board, the ideation board.
Yeah.
So that's for me, Substack is quite targeted. And then I did struggle at the beginning, to be honest, with what am I going to give my paid subscribers? I already do so much. And then I found so many different ways that you can actually add more value to your paid subscribers. So what I did, I have published 3 ebooks now. And so I actually give them to my paid subscribers for free. So if you join my newsletter, no question asked, you have access to my ebooks, which are published on Amazon. You could argue, well, but after they've downloaded them, they can just leave. Yes, but I'm a very prolific writer, so they can guess that there's always something new coming. I have my memoir coming. I'm already talking to other publishers for next year. So that's one thing that I do. Second thing that I do, and this works for me, but it can sparkle ideas on others, I give my paid subscribers a free LinkedIn profile audit, which actually some companies charge a lot of money. And because I have quite a solid experience on LinkedIn myself, I can look at a profile and tell you 5 things that are not working straight away. You're not optimizing the banner. You are not using the featured post. You could optimize the way that you're writing the actual profile. So this is something that I offer, and I have a business proof, which is myself. I have enough presence and enough engagement on LinkedIn that anyone who sees what I'm doing, they'll be like, okay, I think I can trust this woman with a few of her tips. So that's something that my paid subscribers love, because they get it for a very, very cheap price. Like some companies would charge more than $500. But for me, it doesn't actually cost me that much. I love doing it because it's something that I do every day. I know that I'm really helping them. And so not everyone is going to be an expert in writing LinkedIn profiles, but what is it that you can do that would add value to your paid subscribers? And also you have to think of scale. I could not do this. Like, I wish I had 1,000 paid subscribers. I don't. So now that I'm small is also an opportunity for me. It's like, okay, now that I'm small, what can I do that I can still scale within my my possibilities?
Yeah, that's really smart. And with the people in my audience who have so many different talents, like finding it doesn't have to be related to writing or have anything to do with your writing, but it's something else that is a valuable skill that you can offer as an added incentive. And like being a paid subscriber for you, it's $5 a month, right? Is that correct?
Yeah, it's $5. Well, it can be from 5, and I love that they don't allow you to charge less, because we all have this imposter syndrome, like, oh, maybe I'll charge $1. No, you have to charge $5 minimum, and then some people charge 8, some people charge even more. For me, I found that 5 was a good benchmark, because my way of thinking was, well, if people pay $5 on Medium with all the content that you get in there, I find that charging myself $5 a month for only my content was good. But I applaud people who feel, okay, I'm going to charge 8. And it's a good pressure for you to have to deliver. For me, having paid subscribers, it puts so much positive pressure on always thinking, what can I do so that they don't leave me?
Yeah.
How can I add more value? How can I keep it interesting and fresh for them?
So are you now putting the bulk of your efforts and energy into your Substack, and then Medium gets your attention once that has been checked off the to-do list?
It's a work in parallel. I do it
Okay.
in parallel. I will say that at the beginning, I was writing much more. So when I said before that I've almost written 500 articles on Medium, at the beginning, I was writing a lot. And because I think at the beginning, especially, you're trying to figure out what is your voice, what works for you. I didn't have a job. And so that gave me a lot of free time. So I was not very strategic when I started, and I think it's fine. And again, it goes back to my action bias. If you wait to have the perfect strategy to start writing, you're probably never going to start. So for me, I found my strategy as I was writing on Medium. That's how I realized, oh, I write so much here, I might as well write a book. And so that's why I started writing less on Medium, because I started writing books. And I started writing less on Medium because I launched my newsletter. So I still write on Medium, but now it's I have all the different building blocks that I mentioned at the beginning. So I started with Medium, and then I had my newsletter, and then I launched my book at the same time.
Yeah. So perfect segue into the next part. I need to talk to you about your time management. Like more, I mean, people impress me, guests of this show impress me all the time, but you are just hands down. I have just watched you grow and be this prolific person for over a year. I mean, I've been following you since the very beginning. So that's what makes this so exciting for me. But what does a day in the life look like? How do you project manage? How do you time manage? Because you're also a mom and a triathlete. So like tell me how you fit all this stuff in, please.
Sure. So let's start with the most important thing that a lot of people neglect. The most important thing is your sleep. So
Yes.
let's just start there. A lot of people have issues or neglect the sleep, or if you've had a good 7-8 hours sleep and you start fresh, you have such a head start. So that's the first thing for me. I really prioritize sleep, and I wake up very early in the morning. Very early, I mean 5, because I have 2 young kids. So that means that from 6:30, if I'm lucky, that's it. So it's all getting the kids ready and all of that. So sleep is number one. Second is understanding yourself. So self-awareness. And what I mean by this is, what works for you? When is your prime time in the day? What gets you the best ideas? So for me, I'm a morning person. So that's why I wake up so early, because I know, 5 to 6, I'm going to have so many good ideas. So that's something that works for me. But maybe someone is a night owl, so they have to make some changes in their life to really be able to take that prime time, because you're going to be at 100% when you work during that time. And then how do you get your best self? So for me, for example, I get my ideas when I'm running. That's really when I go with no music, no distraction, no phone, no notification. I just go. And yesterday I actually went for a long run, 1 hour and 44 minutes of undistracted, free thinking. It was awesome. I came back. I was thinking about this podcast. I was thinking about my next article. It gave me like that clarity to dissipate all the mental fog. That works for me. For some other people, it might be when they're cooking. Maybe that's a relaxing time, or it could be through meditation. So really prioritizing those moments where you know that you're going to get all these ideas and all this creativity. And then one thing that works really well for me is a variation of the Pomodoro technique. So the Pomodoro technique, for those who might not know it, is this very well-known technique where they say, oh, you work for 25-minute sprint and then you have a break of however minutes. I don't actually believe in that strict, because I think humans are not a copycat of each other. Like, for what works for you might not work for me, but the concept I think is very good. And what I mean by this is very often we work and work, or we ride until we hit the wall and it's burnout, and then you're done. And it's so much better if you start to work and you put a limitation so that you don't hit that wall. You're still in your prime. For me, it's very often 45 to an hour. I'm able to work 100%, and then I take a break before I almost need the break, so that I still feel fresh.
Okay. Yeah.
So
that's really smart, because I definitely am the person who hits the wall. I like this method better. Continue.
yes, absolutely. And so that's why I said that you have to do what works for you. Also, depending on the time of the day. In the morning, because I'm a morning person, I might be able to go for an hour and a half, and then I have my break. In the afternoon, it might only be 30 minutes. But having those breaks before you need them is almost like eating before you get too hungry.
Smart. Yeah. Do you resist taking a break if you're like in the middle of your flow? Like how does that, do you ever wrestle with that?
Yes, because I think when you're in the flow, your tendency is that you keep going and you keep going. And we've been taught at school and at work that you have to do your 8 hours, and we think very much in time. But trying to be aware of the benefits of a break is actually what's going to help you to then come back, refresh, reset, you have more energy. So I almost have to force myself to take those breaks, even when I don't think I need them. And then very often it's like, oh, this was great. I had a problem. I thought about something else. My unconscious was working about the problem. And now, bam, I have the solution, or the word that was missing.
So it's like almost forced, mandated downtime. Like when you were talking about your process of ideating, that's while you're doing something that's essentially mindless. I mean, it's not like you're not doing anything. You're running for an hour and 45 minutes, but it's not mentally taxing. And I think that it's easy to forget that breaks, that not doing anything with our minds is actually necessary for those super sparkly, brilliant ideas to come through. Would you agree?
Absolutely, absolutely. And also, especially more for old generations, that we have this idea that we have to be in a room when we're working. We have to be in front of a computer. We were very much programmed to think that I'm working when I'm in my study. The reality is that for me, the best ideas, as I said, they happen when I'm outside running, or they happen when I'm just walking my dog without my phone and I'm thinking. So it's also a little bit rejecting this traditional idea of what does work look like. It really depends, especially in more creative type of jobs. Is not very often, it's not being in front of just a computer waiting for the ideas to pop up.
I like that. I like to actually like categorize it as working when all you are doing is ideating. That could be sitting in nature, just like staring aimlessly at the horizon, but that could still be some of your best creative time.
And if I was doing the exact same thing, but on a desk, writing a list, people would be, oh, she's working. Whereas if I'm walking my dog, no one would think she's working because it doesn't look like work. But in my mind, this morning when I was walking my dog, I was actually thinking of this podcast, or how to talk about writing in a way that is compelling for the audience. I was thinking about my content strategy. So it's also changing this idea that you have to be on your desk, sitting all the time. That's something that works really well for me. And then a last tip that it doesn't fail is having lists. Is the basic of having a list. What do you want to achieve today? The satisfaction of crossing it off, even if it's small things, because it gives you that little motivation that you keep putting, like the motivation jar, you keep on putting your motivation cookies there. So having lists for me works really, really well.
So would you in a typical day have like Substack article, Medium article, and then something related to the book that I'm currently getting published? Would you have all of those things on a to-do list in a day? You would.
Yeah, absolutely. And crossing it, I have them because I want to cross them. It's like that sense of accomplishment. I'm a triathlete, so it's like, okay.
But do you ever not complete your to-do list and feel bad about yourself? Because that's like my whole life.
No, I don't feel bad because I think it gives me an awareness of self-awareness, like what have I achieved, what haven't I achieved, how I'm going to reprioritize for tomorrow. I think having awareness and being fine with where you are is so important, rather than always goes back to the perfectionism. Like, to be honest, most days I don't even expect to finish that list, but I know it's there, and so in my mind I'm thinking about the things that I'm missing. So it's never about being perfect, but it's about being aware.
Yeah, that's a really good message. And that's been something I've been honing in on this year, especially when talking to my audience, that, the pursuit of perfection, let's all abandon it and give ourselves grace. And it sounds like you've sort of struck that balance really nicely. I love it. I want to talk about your upcoming memoir, The Flight Home: 9 Countries, 9 Values. I had the privilege of reading an excerpt, and I already knew this, but I find your writing style pared down and elegant. It's not stuffed with flowery language and unnecessary detail, and it's somehow more emotionally evocative that way. Like, I love how you described your father's corner office as smelling like leather. Something in that just really like resonated with me. It's just a passing comment, but it lingers on the senses for several more pages. And then there was the line, "Sometimes I think that everything I needed to learn in life, I learned in kindergarten." It's just elegant simplicity. It's just gorgeous, gorgeous writing. And I know that we all thought that we had it bad during the pandemic, but that story about the quarantine facility in Hong Kong that you described, that was individual shipping containers, and the little boy who was not told that it was his 3rd birthday because he and his family were individually locked, right? Not in one shipping container together, individually in their own shipping containers. Is that correct?
With a parent, not by themselves.
They had a parent. Okay.
They had a parent, yes, in the shipping container.
But in cubicles without ventilation, like, it's bananas. That is a bananas story. That story alone is worth buying this book. Those of you listening, she's such a good storyteller. Anyway, but I want to talk about the teacher bullying you. The teacher was obviously racist, and I love how you communicate that without being heavy-handed about it, because that's not really what that story is about. It's about bullying. It's about the effects of bullying on the person being bullied. And as an empath, it made me emotional to read it because it was just so mean-spirited of that teacher. You responded to that unconscionable bullying, the thing that no adult, especially one who has the power to mold impressionable minds, should ever do to a child. You responded to it by excelling, by being the best student in the class. I too was bullied by a teacher in high school who said I would never amount to anything as a writer, and I became one of only 3 people that passed the advanced placement test at the end of the year. And at the time, when I was in high school, I was sort of known for being a bit of a slacker. I think because of that young age, it was the only way I could express my disdain for rules, was just to actively avoid doing what was expected of me. But I broke my ass to pass that AP test. So while we're both obviously in agreement that teachers should never bully their students, I also feel like both of us kind of benefited from those experiences. But I also know there are a great number of people out there who would let something like that defeat them, who would like try to shrink into the shadows and be invisible, or who would inadvertently self-sabotage to, prove those teachers right. And I fully understand those outcomes as well. In my case, I was trying to prove my teacher wrong, but not in an I'm so tough, I'll show you kind of way. It was definitely more of a, if I'm good and perform perfectly for you, maybe I'll convince you to like me kind of way. It was not the warrior path. It was the people pleaser path, but it doesn't matter because it benefited me. Do you think that experience contributed to your determined nature? And what advice would you give someone else about using a similar experience as positive motivation?
Mm, absolutely. And even if we zoom out a bit, it's not only bullying, but I think any obstacle, any challenge that you have in life, you always have two options. You can be the victim, or you can decide to do something about it. And that something can be face, it can be fight, it can be grow, it can be learn. But I think that that attitude when you're facing challenges is what it's all about, and is what the book is all about. Most of the chapters is stories throughout my life where I had to face challenges, but I call it a very positive book because I always talk about what I try to do to turn that into something positive. I'm not saying, of course, that bullying is positive, but what I'm saying is that when people are rejecting you, when people are diminishing you, what are you going to do? Is more about being thought-provoking. How are you going to face this situation? So the situation in itself, it is what it is. I read this a line that really resonated with me, and it said, life is 10% what happens to you and 90% how you react to it. And that's what it's all about for me. Yeah, the bullying happened, many years ago. That's 10%. What I got out of it, I had to grow. I had to prove myself that even if I was different, I was Spanish in a French system, in a French school, that I was able to be just as good, if not the best, of the students in the class. And that was not going to let me down. So it always goes back to you. Like, the situation is what it is. My message is, don't become the victim, because life is 10% what happens to you and 90% how you react to it. So that's number one. And number two is, I think I was able to go through that situation because I had amazing parents that gave me this amazing support, that empowered me whenever I didn't know the words in class. They told me, you're trying your best, and trying your best is good enough. And find those supporters, because it's very hard in this case in particular, but in any challenge, if you're by yourself, if someone is bullying you and you look around and you see no support, there's no life jacket, it's very difficult to swim. But find that community, or that tribe where people are going to be supporting you, because it's much easier when you look around and you see that people are smiling.
Yeah, definitely. And I agree with you. I mean, that's what I love, is that you have that choice between being the victim or realizing how much power you actually have to choose a different outcome. And that seems to be a lesson that you learned at a really young age, which I just think is so valuable. You lived in nine countries are represented in this memoir. Do you speak 9 different languages?
No, sorry to disappoint. I speak 6 languages.
Okay, okay. And those were all learned in your youth. Is that
Some
correct?
of them were, some of them
Okay.
were. So I learned first, well, Spanish is my first language. Then I learned French. Then I learned Portuguese. And then I learned English, which is my fourth language.
Wow.
And then growing up, I moved to Italy. So I learned Italian there. And I've been in China. By China, I mean Greater China, Taiwan, China, and now Hong Kong for 20 years now. So that's where I learned Chinese.
Wow. I mean, add that to the list of things that you are doing in your free time. And it just, I can't, I didn't believe you actually slept. So to have you mention that as like priority number one was a little bit of a shock to me, because I was like, no way. She sleeps 2 hours a night, but it sounds like I'm the same. I have to prioritize that. I can only do my best creative thinking after I've had a good night's sleep. So that's definitely relatable. So I just want to say to those of you listening, you will not regret buying this book when it comes out, because I've only read a small portion of it and I can't wait. It's just that well written. And I have to say that the fact that you spent your formative years running back and forth through no man's land to see how fast you could get from Spain to France, like, is something I can see little me doing. That's the best thing about stories like this, is when you can see yourself in them, even though they're somebody else's completely unique story. I still felt that happening as I was reading yours. And you guys will have to get the book to understand what I'm talking about. But I wouldn't be fangirling to this extent if I didn't believe that you guys will all truly love it. So before we get to the part where you tell my listeners how they can find out more about you and read your excellent work, is there anything that you would like to add to multi-passionates in particular? Just a message of hope?
Yes, I think the message of hope is, I call it the zoom out strategy, and it's a positive message of encouragement that very often when we're starting something, and I still consider myself a beginner, if you don't see a progress after a day or a week, you tend to think that things are not working, that you are a failure, or maybe that this is not for you. But then when you zoom out and you look at what you've achieved, and achieved is not always an outcome, is the progress. It could be that 6 months ago you had never written, and now you've written 10 articles or 20. It really helps you understand that progress is invisible. And people tend to think that progress and results are the same, but it's not. Very often, progress is not visible to the naked eye, and you only celebrate it when you see an actual result. The results will come. So focus on your journey, zoom out, celebrate the small wins, because you have to enjoy the journey. It's not about just ticking a box, and happiness is not about reaching a destination. It's now, it's today. So enjoy what you're doing, and keep that big vision that we talked about at the beginning.
Yeah, that's really good advice. And I think in a world that is so focused on accomplishments, the progress that you are making is the thing, as a multi-passionate in particular, that you have to be mindful of, because sometimes you don't see those accomplishments for a long time, or you're going an inch in multiple different directions. And so, you're feeling frustrated by that. I think that is absolutely excellent advice. I love it. So tell my audience how they can find out more about you.
Absolutely. So if you want to start writing, I would definitely recommend that you go on Medium. So you can find me on Medium. You can find also my newsletter on Substack called The Lemon Tree Mindset. For those of you who are more into personal branding, I would suggest to connect on LinkedIn. That's where I do a lot of work on as a consultant as well, and that's where I get a lot of leads. So if you're looking out at commercializing what you're doing, I think LinkedIn is a great platform. And last but not least, I have different books. So you can find The Lemon Tree Mindset is my first book on Amazon. And now I'm really, really excited about The Flight Home. I think it's really a story that can resonate with a lot of people, because we all face challenges in life. And as I was saying, having this mindset, this positive mindset of growing from it, is something that anyone can benefit. So it's a perfect Christmas gift. It's a perfect positive read to start the year strong.
Yay. And it's coming out in time for the holidays. When it's the 8th is when it launches officially, of December.
Correct.
Yeah. So you guys get out there, buy one. You won't regret it. Buy one for your friends. It's just so good. This was the nuggets of wisdom in this episode are incomparable. Thank you so much for spending this time with me. I so appreciate it.
Thank you, Jenny. It was a pleasure.
Oh my gosh, Boss Fam. I feel like that episode was loaded with Easter eggs, like golden nuggets of wisdom that I had never even heard before. I feel like I just got a whole new education from Veronica. And I hope that you benefited from this conversation as well. If you enjoyed it and found it useful, would you please share it with other multi-passionates, especially those who aspire to be a writer? I think they would find it really useful. And if this topic is right up your alley, check out the conversation I had with Lily Penhall on self-publishing and tapping into your creative flow. That is episode 89. Lily is a huge advocate for self-publishing. And in that episode, you will learn all about why she feels that way. And don't forget to grab your free copy of Lifestyle Design for Multi-Passionates. This is the guidebook that I wish I had had from the very beginning. answer a few simple questions about your deepest struggles, and get focusing hacks, time management strategies, job suggestions, and confidence enhancing tools specific to who you are. Plus, learn to steal back 24 hours a month of your time. No big deal. That's just a whole entire day to do more sparkly things. Go and grab your copy today at jennyo'connor.com/good life. And until next time, remember to be like Veronica. Be a victor, not a victim. Now get on out there and do the thing.